Issues of marriage, religious freedom, and more, it says, with State Representative Matt Krause, State Representative Briscoe Kane, and State Representative Cole Hefner. If y'all come up to the stage. So, Representative Cole Hefner is from East Texas. He's a small business owner. I know his wife is here with him, and so did tremendous work on these important issues last session. Matt Krause has been in the legislature for a number of sessions. He is a fourth-generation Texan. He's from Fort Worth. I think the Dallas Cowboys Stadium is in your district? Yeah, so my boys love you for that. All right, and so we got from H-Town, from the great city, Houston area, home of the World Series champion Houston Astros. Briscoe Kane, a lawyer, and he is a member of the Texan Army. There's all kinds of historical stuff about Briscoe I could talk about. He's a real Texan, okay? That's what he's all about. All right, so we're going to talk about some issues that happened during the legislative session, and I'm going to join these gentlemen because you guys had a lot of fun last session. A lot of fun over in the Texas House. Yes, sir.
Have I managed to get to the right with Briscoe Kane?
It looks like both of us did. Yeah, he needs to brush up a little. Okay, so we know that in 2017, it was the third session in a row that the legislature passed, and Governor Abbott, before it was Governor Perry, but Governor Abbott twice now, signed a religious liberty bill into law. You saw that at the intro video, if y'all remember that from earlier. 2013 was the Merry Christmas bill, then in 2015 was the Pastor Protection Act, and then in 2017 was the Freedom to Serve Children's Act, called the Home Act by some because of its original name in the 2015 legislative session. But there's been, in those issues, hit specific areas, maybe not as broad as some other areas or whatever, but hit specific areas of religious liberty, but extremely significant. The Pastor Protection Act was passed right in a climate of when the U.S. Supreme Court was about to decide the Obergefell decision on same-sex marriage. The 2017, that bill that protects adoption and foster care agencies so the government can't punish them for making decisions, what they do in the foster and adoption care climate, and in that work, based on their religious beliefs that marriage between a man and a woman, life begins at conception, things of that nature. We've seen those entities get attacked in other parts of the country. Their fear of litigation and the government control and punishment has put a lot of them out of business. They've stopped operating, so timely there. So, but last session, there were 29 bills that were filed, or maybe a few more on religious liberty. But that's largely because in response because of some of the attacks that we've seen on religious liberty with a lot of new issues coming up. And so we're going to talk about some of those. And we did have Scott Sanford was on the panel. He is an executive pastor of a church. So if there's any good reason to get out of your panel on religious liberty, it's because you had church duties. So he did have church duties that got into conflict. So thank you, Representative Cole, for joining our panel and sitting in for Representative Sanford. And so, Representative Krause, I'm going to start with you, and other panelists can jump in, but, you have been a part of these religious liberty efforts, and you've done work as a lawyer on these type of things. Even though there are other states that work on this, it seems to be that Texas has a good idea, or usually is kind of towards the front, and it's a pretty good climate for passing these type of things. Sometimes we know this, who's in the speaker's position, or who has been lately, has made it difficult. We know that. But we know, as we know, Speaker Strauss is not going to be coming back. But, oftentimes we'll see, it's not just a Republican issue. We'll see Democrats get involved. But it appears that the climate is starting to get even stronger for advancements, if you will, and needed legislation on religious liberty moving into this next session with what's happening at the Supreme Court and others. Tell us about your experience with some of these issues and what you see now that we're headed in 2019.
Yeah, thanks. It's an honor to be with y'all here today. I always love being in Austin, but also seeing House District 93 constituents. So Pastor Tom, great seeing you, and Vincent Monopuente, awesome, great seeing y'all. And yeah, the religious liberty issue is such an important one, I think, to many of us. And it is to Scott Sanford as well. I call him Pastor Sanford. His church built a chapel, and he's been in charge of that entire construction project. And when you know it, Sunday is the day they're opening that up, and everything's just hitting today. And so that's why he couldn't be here. And he wanted me to apologize to y'all. He would have loved to have been here, but
we're just going to ask you his question.
That's fine. I'll take it. But I'll tell you, the religious liberty front is one that I know that I've been passionate about for a long time. Briscoe and I were talking about that even before both of us got into the legislature, just because we both feel that this is one of the foundational principles that our country, if not our state, was founded upon. And if we lose the ability to have religious liberty, then liberty without the religious in front of it is close behind. And so, so for a while I was kind of getting concerned with the judges that Obama was appointing, the way that things were going, the way the states were moving. But I think we've seen a pretty big shift in the last 18 to 24 months. And what we're starting to see now is that states are actually on the proactive move for religious liberties. We've seen it in Mississippi with different language that the Fifth Circuit upheld, and we've seen it in the recent Supreme Court opinions. And I don't know if you know, but such a breath of fresh air, kind of like the whole month of June out of the Supreme Court. You had the Masterpiece Cake decision, which you heard about earlier. You had the pro-life centers in California that didn't have to promote a message if they didn't want to. You had the Janus case, which dealt with union dues, compulsory union dues. And so the Supreme Court was sending the message, we are not going to allow government to compel enforced speech, whether you agree with it, whether you don't agree with it, whether it's popular, whether it's not. And I think that was the one common theme we saw through all that. And so because of that, I think it gives us a lot of encouragement and a lot of hope that, of course, that means for the religious liberty piece of this whole discussion as well, the government should not be able to force you to say certain things or not say certain things for fear of penalty or injury by the government. If the private market, if the private sector wants to penalize you and no longer patron you or come to your store or buy your goods or do this, that's up to them. That's a decision for the market. But the government should never penalize you for a belief that has nothing to do with what you're actually trying to provide to the public. And so because of those decisions, I think it gives us favorable ground. Because of the Trump administration's rapid pace at appointing judges and confirming judges, especially at the circuit court level, that could go a long way to upholding a lot of these measures that Texas and other states are going to try to push. And so that's why I think we kind of have the wind at our back at the moment. I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to get some things done. And once we get them done in the House, I know that Lieutenant Governor Patrick is a strong supporter of religious liberty, and many senators are, Senator Hancock and others of that in the Senate. And I know the governor is a huge proponent of religious liberty and protecting that. So we should be able to get something signed. And then because of the favorable climate right now in the judiciary, I think it'll be upheld as well. So I'm very optimistic about what's going to happen, and look forward to being proactive during the next session to make sure that we're taking advantage of the opportunity.
Well, just so people understand how these things work, right? We have the First Amendment of the Constitution. We have a law in Texas called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So a lot of times people think, well, we have laws in place that say the government can't discriminate against you, the government can't punish you because of your religious beliefs, but all of a sudden you have these new issues regarding same-sex marriage and sexuality come along, and people want to act as if, oh, well, this is completely different. Those rules don't apply the same. So the legislatures have, and not only Texas, but other states have had to come in and say, yes, religious liberty applies in this situation. Yes, religious liberty applies in that situation. And that's what Texas has been doing a lot of. Representative Kane, how was your experience this first session on those issues?
That's awesome that you want to ask me that question. I'm going to sidestep and go, you were mentioning legislation real quick though, but it's tough to follow a pastor's son, by the way. If I didn't know that, he's a bright guy. You were mentioning though that the state has passed legislation to protect religious liberty, and so I'm going to take my bully pulpit and actually mention it because it needs to be reformed. There's the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I wish Kelly was still here from the Alliance Defending Freedom. Ours, though, sadly, and this is something maybe you can help me push to get done, we have a 1-year statute of limitation. It's really not that long. The federal version, you can go back as far as you want. So, and in Texas, if you want to sue somebody for violating religious liberty, you have to send them a 30-day notice letter before you sue them and say, please stop violating my rights. So, we need to fix the statute. All right, that's all I have to say. It's rarely used in Texas because of that. And then the other thing to encourage all of you out there, kind of a call to action. A lot of these things happen. I'm sure you've heard all the time about cities violating people's religious rights. Sadly, not too many people come forward. They just accept it. there's this assumption out there that if your city does something, they're right. Right? They must have consulted the city attorney. Any city attorneys in the room? Those are all morons, by the way. Like they,
I think Brent Webster worked in the district attorney's office, but that's a whole job, right?
Yeah, it's a different role. But those, that level, okay, really, they don't know what they're doing. And so people just accept it, that like, oh, okay, if they told me I can't pray on my lunch break, they must be right.
Well, and these aren't hypotheticals.
No,
okay?
exactly. I mean,
this is the case you worked on
yeah,
in Beaumont,
yeah.
and this is an issue that has a ton of precedent regarding having something on your own time, even though it's on government property, government employees, where you see it all the time that during the lunch hour, that employees will have a Bible study. And here, you and I, you asked me to give you a little bit of insight on it. It's really your case, though, and just a few years ago. And so we're having to, really go through these things time and time again. And a lot of that is because people just assume because of so many attacks on religious liberty, they probably don't have any rights, or they're very few.
Knew what he was talking about.
Oh, that's the other thing, right?
So stop assuming that, and when it happens, call somebody, call one of us. Either way, so you asked about my first session. You actually want me to answer that question?
I do.
Excellent. So Strauss is gone. Now, there's still a lot of bad guys, okay? Trump talks all the time. There's still a swamp that needs to be draining. I think all too often we give all the other guys that allowed it and kind of tolerated it a pass. Like, it wasn't your fault. You're an abused child. We act like Strauss is the only bad guy. So I'm still curious if those bad actors who tolerated that sin for long enough, outside the guys up here, I'm telling you right here, the two sitting next to me did not tolerate it, by the way. And I'm glad, and I think that was part of getting rid of him. But what's going to be going forward is going to be determinative whether the people are going to tolerate it again, if we have another tyrant. So I did enjoy my first session.
There's some people that think that you had an uber successful first session. I'll get back to that in just a minute. It's because we would like Cole Hefner join the discussion. Speaking of religious liberty, and we'll talk about the life issue too in this panel, and y'all's perspective from the legislators' perspective, but a lot of discussion about religious liberty has been the government punishing private business owners. We saw some of this in the context of the privacy issue, the government trying to have rules in place and so on to pressure businesses, to force them to allow men and women's bathrooms and so on. You're a private business owner. There are a lot of private business owners that are in the legislature, but we're seeing now, and a lot of times at the local level, not so much at the federal level now that Trump is there, but there's still some, probably those bureaucrats there. And so we saw this in East Texas. There was a bakery out there, Edie DeLorme, who was going to be one of our speakers, but she had to cancel at the last minute. She had a bakery out in East Texas, close to where your district is, and where people were threatening to hurt her, to harm her, simply because she wanted to run her business based on her religious beliefs, and she didn't want to be forced to do otherwise. It's very important for us to make sure, if we got to do it specifically in law, that private business owners are not giving up their religious liberty rights. Am I right?
Absolutely. It's important to remember that elections have consequences, and we've seen that never more evident than this Trump being elected. And how many people has had their expectations exceeded? My hands in the air. Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised. And then you see the judges trickling down and all this stuff. So it's real. And Briscoe touched on the election that we're going to get to take a part in January. And so hopefully we'll be able to get some good leadership, and so that we can solidify some of these religious liberty protections and things. One thing, a lot of folks think that religious freedom came about because of America. That's not really the case. America came about because of religious freedom. So it's a cornerstone, and that person is the cornerstone of our belief. And what we've seen is the liberal movement. These folks go after state legislatures and the national legislature, and it hasn't been working as well. So what we're seeing is this use of school boards, city councils, and commissioners courts. And those folks who are good folks that are serving. I was a county commissioner for 4 years. It's an extremely difficult job to serve at the local level, because where we vote on an issue, our votes may eventually affect someone directly, but when a city councilman or a county commissioner or school board member, when they take a vote, it directly affects the person, and that person they see at church, they see at the grocery store. So it's a hard job. I'm thankful they're doing it. But conservatives have also preached a lot of times local control. Local control is best. And while I am a local control advocate, we don't need to allow absolute local control. And so when they start trampling on these rights or religious liberties or any other rights, then sometimes the sovereign has to step in and defend those rights. So that's what we're seeing with these cities and schools come in. So that's when we have to step up and defend. And then we hear the well, you know, you guys are telling us what to do at the local level. Y'all are always preaching to the feds about telling y'all what to do, and now y'all are telling us what to do. And which I respond, well, you know, the states created the federal government, and the states also created the counties and cities. So counties and cities are an extension of the state government to carry out state enforcement at the level. And so we can step in when they begin to encroach on those religious liberties, annexation, or whatever the rights
Yeah,
are.
I think what you're saying is the states created the local government.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And the national government.
Yes.
We are creating both.
So, and I don't think people, a lot of times people realize that you know, where they're deriving, particularly local governments who are deriving their authority from, and a lot of times people are saying, well, you know, maybe the state should start taking it away. And because they're getting into issues that I think a lot of people locally would not expect them to get involved in. And a lot of times, it's done behind closed doors. You really have only no notice, or the notice you have is people are not expecting to see that. And so, you know, they'll post a notice on a Friday, and then the hearing is on a Monday. They did that here in the city of Austin, trying to restrict pro-life pregnancy centers at one point. I think it was over Easter weekend, if I may recall accurately. And so all these artful ways, and so they wonder, well, nobody came to the hearing. I guess there was no opposition. And so you have a situation where we see that if it's not done at the state level, it's not consistent. There's a lot of concern about whether or not, you know, that the local governments are getting away with stuff that they shouldn't. And you don't have local control when the local people have no control, when they're not being made aware of these things. So I mentioned Uber, so we'll go back to Representative King about the Uber interesting session you had. Let's talk about the Uber bill and an amendment that you had some success with on the House floor, because a lot of talk about legislation, but a lot can be done on amendment when you have the Speaker of the House, not letting things go through, but you have a clear majority, right? People don't want to vote. Don't bring that bill up. We don't want to take a hard vote. You did something interesting this session on that issue.
Yes. I'll give you some background, and then everybody be suspenseful, like, what is he talking about? We were trying it over and over again. We couldn't get the bathroom bill to the floor, and so we would do all kinds of motions and parliamentary inquiries, wondering how we can get it out of committee. Right? We all remember this. So we just kind of had the idea, like, you know what? We're going to tag the bathroom bill on everything. Really, we just started amending it. I draft good amendments, right? I know the rules. Okay, go ahead. So the parliamentarian was wrong every time he said my stuff wasn't germane. I promise you it was. But we finally got a germane one. So we would try over and over. And they're just like, oh God, really? Y'all are going to try and force us to vote on gender, being male and female. Yeah, we're going to do it every time we can. So we found this bill. The Uber bill was House Bill 100. It was a great vehicle for it. It was perfect. That was good. You had a church open? House Bill 100. And it had a non-discrimination clause in it that prohibited discrimination of passengers based on national origin. He's holding up 2 yellow signs. I don't know what that means. 2 minutes? No, longer. National origin, race, sex, and a few other things. And so we thought, let's add a definition of what sex is. So we did. And we defined sex as sex for the purpose of whatever that is. Shall be defined as the physical being of male female. And guess what? Every Republican that was present, it was 90 of us. There were a few that weren't present, and some that were probably hiding maybe. But every single Republican that could vote, voted yes. Go figure. The body had an appetite for it. The votes weren't there. Yeah, the votes weren't there. I mean, by the way, someone may not have supported it. They would have been really afraid if they not voted for it, though, because we would have smashed it over the head in the primaries. But they voted for it. 90. Everyone voted for it, and so now we have a weird place in law that defines sex as the physical state of being male and female. That's beautiful. Oh, and by the way, though, we went over to the Senate, and the Senate sponsor of it, whose initials start with CS, he stripped it, and Dan Patrick, our hero over there, forced him to put it back in. So it's in law today.
Yeah, we might remind the Lieutenant Governor of that later. So there was a vote this last session on that issue, and I interject for just a minute because I think it's important. We hear that a lot of times. Oh, the votes aren't there, you know. Look, if the bill comes out of committee, sure. I'll vote for it. You see all these excuses and reasons because a lot of times people go to Austin, they want to do something different than what they're telling their members, their constituents. And so, yeah, we're a little behind time on this panel, so I'm going to allow us to run through that time limit just a little bit.
Are you okay with that?
To respect the length of this. So it's my party. No, I'm just kidding.
It was your birthday yesterday. Did you know that? His birthday was yesterday?
Okay, that's right. So, let's go back to, well, let's let each one of y'all chime in on this. So, look, this is about transparency overall too, right? About constituents being aware of what's going on. Our team is at the Capitol every day, so we have a good awareness, but a lot of people aren't aware of some of these things. And so, talk to each one of y'all, our group, about the impact and what people can do to get in touch with their elected officials, and the real story of the impact it does have when you send a phone call or email or come in person. Tell us if it really does matter, if it's really noticed by elected officials.
Yeah, it's especially that last one you talked about, showing up in person is huge. And during session, if you can make it down to Austin, or if you live in the area, you can come for those committee hearings, or you can be in your member's office, just reminding them, hey, vote yes on this, vote no on this, I want you to watch this, I want you to help with this. That's a huge help, but I'd say even more important than coming during session is working your member outside of session. Even right now, be going to your members' district offices and just saying, hey, here's kind of my priorities, here's what I'm going to be watching during the next session, here's the way I hope you'll vote, here's the way I hope you'll line up with a lot of my priorities. And it just puts that bug in their ear earlier. So it's not becoming 2 days before the vote and you're hearing about this issue. You've already heard about it 2, 3, 4 months before. You know constituents back home are excited about this, energized about it, passionate about it, and it makes a huge difference. So to me, that's the biggest thing. Phone calls are good, emails are good, but nothing beats that one-on-one touch, that in-person touch with your legislator, because that's the most effective, and it's so much more effective outside of the 140 days than before. That's when you can have the maximum impact. Unless something pops up and you can get down here right when it's happening, that helps, but beforehand is always better.
Representative Cohen.
Yeah, so the impact of people expressing their wishes, it works. I mean, it really does work. We listen, we log phone calls, we log emails, we have this real fancy system that tells us, how many people call for and against an issue, and it works. We listen. And these three, I'll speak for myself and my two colleagues here, we don't go into the district and campaign on conservative issues and then come down to Austin and hide behind the process. I mean, we really believe this stuff, and we really want to come down here, and we wanted to vote on the Privacy Act. We wanted to vote on property tax reform. We wanted to vote on all these things, and because we want to make a difference. So we're not saying one thing in the district and doing another thing in Austin. That happens a lot of times, but it does work. And I know that people are busy and trying to make a living and raise their family, and I'm 300 miles from the Capitol where I live with my lovely wife back here and our 7 kids. And are you guys, by the way, y'all are lagging behind there, are y'all 5, 4, 7? Yeah. So it seems like 7's been the number today. So these guys need to catch up, right? But
all right, we're about to go in the speed round.
all right,
okay.
But it does work. We appreciate all y'all.
Handwritten letters, even short ones,
Letters.
really, really valuable. Please don't send us long Facebook messages. That's the worst.
All right, we got a little behind schedule, so I'm gonna do speed round here real quick. Speed rounds. All right, quick answers. So Representative Kane, you and I worked together on this. You did most of the work.
You were there.
I showed up to the press conference. But you exposed a lot of the baby body parts issue here in Texas with some of the universities and so on. Look, there was a court ruling. We think the Attorney General will appeal that on fetal remains, body parts, those issues. There's still important pro-life work to do in the state of Texas, correct? And that you're going to be...
Is that the only answer you want?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, awesome. So,
15 seconds.
Oh, really? So I used to do a bunch of legal work for some pro-life groups. So I get a phone call. David DeLayden from the Center for Medical Progress calls me. He just gets releases. January 25th, he was indicted. We walked in and he calls me. He's like, I think it's time to release the invoices. It's a great idea. So we, through a Public Information Act request, I really think the university screwed up when they did this. Like, I don't think they intended to give me what they gave me, but 4 medical schools, University of Texas Medical Branch Galveston, Houston, Dallas, and Texas Tech El Paso, all gave us responsive documents showing they were buying and selling baby body parts from Planned Parenthood. But what would really mattered about this is it lined up perfectly with David's videos out of Houston. The code words that were being used by Missy Farrell are there on our invoices and things like profit. And anyways, we ended up giving them over to the federal Congress. They had a subcommittee, and Congress actually recommended criminal charges on Planned Parenthood Go Close. January 25th, me and Jonathan signed. January 28th, released the analysis.
The often underused value and art of Public Information Act requests are very valuable and something you can do as a citizen. You can always call our office if you want insight. You don't have to be a lawyer to submit those. So important legislation on the pro-life issue. Be working on this session.
Heartbeat bill. I'm just going to answer it for me.
That you agree I'd just say overall will be a priority this session.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk on the non-discrimination aspect of abortion. You can't choose if you're having a boy, don't want a boy, abort that baby. If you're having a girl, don't have a girl, abort that baby. We want to make a non-discrimination where no matter who that child is, what sex, what race they are, you keep that child and you're going. So I think the non-discrimination part's probably what we're going to focus on.
All right, last thing, I don't know if I'll let Representative Hefner speak on that one, but last question, because we're like way beyond time, but I'm just going to throw this in. Masterpiece Cake Baker decision, we talked about that earlier. It seemed to be clear that the U.S. Supreme Court has said that you can't discriminate based on religious beliefs, you can't have these hostile words by government officials based on people's religious beliefs in this case. And so, but sometimes a lot of people, well, we don't know what the Supreme Court said, we're not really sure what that said. I think it's clear that they have given us some roadmap, if you will, for the next step, making sure we have something in state law that says, yes, here's where a line is drawn on this issue. We think that's going to be something that's going to be active this session. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes. And something you guys would be interested in being involved in as well.
Absolutely.
These are easy questions.
Yes.
Hey, everybody, real quick, like on the count of 3, you want to sing happy birthday, Jonathan?
No, we don't.
Right? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Jonathan. And everybody knew your name. It's really awkward. We had to sing happy birthday and another name.
All right, so you can count on these guys to be working on religious liberty, marriage and family, life issues, but don't take it for granted, if you will, though, because having leaders, even if it's just a few, can make a huge difference. And so let's give a round of applause for